But I'm going to go ahead and get started. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jackie Garrick, or Dr. Jackie Garrick now, the founder of Whistleblowers of America. We started these roundtables, I guess about 2 years ago now, so that we can connect and be a community. So I'm always excited when we see people joining, especially new people. We don't always get to see everybody every time. So it's always, I think, always interesting and fun when we get to have these roundtables so that we can continue to share and sync up our information and our resources and our support for each other. Tonight's roundtable is focused on unemployment post-whistleblowing, and as many of you know, that is always a challenge. Whistleblowers are terminated in many ways, very often without any previous notice. They've been whistleblowers, they've done or made some sort of formal complaint, and then all of a sudden they're poor performers, they're disgruntled, they're ostracized, they're tainted. There's a myriad of things we'll probably discuss tonight that happens that takes you down a career path that ultimately puts you outside of your career, but also sometimes your profession, and that reinventing the wheel is what I wanted us to focus on tonight. I think this is really an important topic. There's lots of challenges that come with this. I know it's often something that people feel really uncomfortable discussing when you're trying to get a new job, put a new foot forward, and there's always that apprehension. Well, what if somebody asks me about why I left my other job, or why was I fired? And I think having that discussion tonight is what I'm hoping we will get out of this conversation. So I think we've assembled a diverse group of speakers that each has a little bit different perspective on unemployment, reemployment, self-employment, and maybe education, and some of the opportunities that are out there for people to take advantage of as they think through this. And sometimes it does mean thinking outside the box, letting go of sort of that old self or that self-image that we've held on to, so that we can be creative and find new ways to do something else. So with that, we kind of always start with like a lightning rod of introductions with the speakers. So Gretal, I've probably talked to you about this topic. It was a while ago, but if you can introduce yourselves, and then I'll ask Jade and Tanya, who I know really well because she helps us quite a bit as a volunteer with Whistleblowers of America. But Gretal, if you will introduce yourself. Oh, you're on mute. I can't hear you.
I'll try that. See if
there you go.
Thank you. Changing from different systems, I'm never sure which one is going to keep the mic on or not. Either way, my name is Dr. Gretal Leibnitz. I'm an experimental psychologist by training. I have a background in the academy. I left sorry, there's a little bit of an echo that I'm experiencing, so I'll try and go over that. I left the academy to become independent in 2014, and was very successful as a grant writer and served as a support co-PI, PI, and project director on about a half a dozen grants since 2010 through the National Science Foundation. Given the most recent executive order in May 2nd was a doomsday for many of us at the National Science Foundation. All 3 of my grants were terminated, and I was immediately unemployed. It had nothing to do with work-related efforts, and had everything to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion, particularly in science, technology, engineering, and math. My target area of expertise was women in engineering specifically, and it was so this is, although I have been unemployed occasionally during my professional career, this is the first time it's been quite so sweeping and quite so profound. So we'll start with that. Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Garrick, I think you're on mute.
We couldn't hear you either. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry. There was all that feedback, so I put everything on mute. So Jade, over to you for your introduction so that you can tell us a little bit about yourself and your center.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Dr. Jade Singleton, and I studied and spent a lot of time learning about something that some of you might find interesting, which is workplace gaslighting. That was what my dissertation was in, and whether or not we can train folks to be able to identify it. Shocker, we can, right? To be able to pick up on that. I run a strategic transformation consultancy, advised at NASA, and very much like Dr. Gretal Lynn here, went through that whole DEI eradication situation as well. And so, needing to pick up those pieces and components, I think, and figure out that reinvention and what it looks like. And I don't know, if it's appropriate to say or not, but I do want to tell you, Dr. Gretal Lynn, I am so grateful for the work that you've done in working at NASA, and seeing the what folks put into the sciences, how it is everything, how it is so instrumental to us all. I want to thank you for your service to humanity.
Thank you. That means a lot, especially right now. Thank you.
All right, I guess, Tanya, you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. I'm Tanya Richman. I am a whistleblower. I was vice president of a transportation company that serviced fracking sites. After that point in time, due to the onslaught of things that transpired, which we'll be talking about today, I came across paths with Jackie. And from there, they employed me as their director of business development, which is what I am doing currently.
Okay, so let's so now that we have a better sense of who everybody is, I think that my first question is, what's it like to be fired, terminated, demoted? What are some of the research and the studies that might help explain the impact of that? And I know the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, talks about the loss of employment, job loss, as potentially leading to a mental health crisis, whether it be temporary or long term. So let's just take a minute to even talk about why we're talking about this. Why is unemployment such a major life event?
Well, I can say for me, it caused a lot of loss of self-identity initially. I had to reinvent myself. It caused a lot of turmoil mentally. Mm-hmm. It came along with a lot of, stigmas. There's a public one, there's a self one, family, and even professional stigma that it came along with all of that, which is also associated with, the lack of, employment or to gain employment for people in our situations.
Mm-hmm. Gretel, why are we studying or even thinking about unemployment?
Oh, I wish I had a deeper background in terms of the research on unemployment. All I can speak to is my own personal experience, but also collective experience. I've led a national community of practice of change leaders for the last decade and a half, since 2010. And this executive order termination, carte blanche of all of us at the same time, a whole community of people that have developed and honed their expertise over the last 20 years in this area, that have applied this work to supporting American excellence in a global economy, has been buffered by the fact that I'm not alone. And I think that can be a profound consequence of being a whistleblower, is that oftentimes you're incredibly isolated. Where I am somewhat unique from my other colleagues is that typically advance or NSF awards go to an institution of higher education, and so faculty are identified as PIs, and they have a role beyond the grant itself. I am an external consultant hired because of my expertise in being successful at garnering grants, and so they would bring me in as an external person to the institution, but I was independent. And the consequence of that is that I have no income whatsoever, no health insurance, no anything, as a consequence of very swift order. The other piece of it that I think really relates to the experience of a whistleblower is the sense of having your work dismissed or minimized. There's a huge prejudice now. Maybe there was previously, but not in the circles that I was operating in, and with the chief diversity officers and whole communities of folks that recognize the value of holding us to our highest standard, which is about equity and inclusion. And recognizing historic racism and all those other pieces. So to now be in a system that now calls that work suspect is, as a collective, we're like, my gosh, we're not only cut off at the knees in terms of our professional capacity, but also silenced. The words that we use, the language that we use to help people learn and address inequities that are absolutely a part of human systems are now suspect. And so that's another piece of it that that's why Jade's comment was so powerful, because it was like, thank you, at least someone recognizes that this whole community is not meaningless. It is of value. So there's some senses in which I absolutely relate to whistleblowers, and there's some senses in which I've been buffered because I have a community of others that are navigating at the same time. It's sad to be in a cohort of people that have all been minimized and dismissed, and yet it's also helpful psychologically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that shared lived experience often focuses on the bad times of our lives, but it also helps make them less painful and less, I don't want to say less stressful, but it gives us some validation that we're not the only ones. And of course, being terminated feels like you're the only one who's ever been fired from a job when it's happening, but clearly it happens on a very regular basis. So people are not completely alone in all of this. So Jade, I want to go back though to what you said earlier about gaslighting. Is terminating somebody, demoting them, is that gaslighting?
No. So terminating someone and demoting them is not gaslighting, in and of itself. But what could lead to that termination or that how it's positioned. And so there's really a few key tactics with gaslighting behaviors as it relates to the workplace. We tend to think of gaslighting as dyadic. I mean, that's how it's been presented to us. But when we're dealing with a work environment, it's compounded because the person who is doing the gaslighting has to get others to go along with them. So your reality is consistently off base. And so there's a lot of the invalidation, the dismissiveness, but the most dreadful component, I believe, is the lack of reliance that you develop on your own recollection, on your own reality. So swapping that reality for whoever it is that is in power, whether that be, social power, hierarchical power. So in and of itself, no, it's not. But the reasons behind it certainly can be.
So let's talk about the pivot for a minute. So we were just talking about having this identity and a community and where we fit in and where we belong. But what I really want to get to in the heart of the matter today is this recovering from unemployment. And Jade, I think you've done some voc rehab work. Explain a little bit about what that is and what is vocational rehabilitation? What might be some of the options for that? And how do we start to think outside our box?
Yeah. So I haven't been as formal as vocational rehab, but what I did was go out and kind of share stories and bring folks into what we're calling the plot twist network, where people are able to really focus on that identity component, building back the narrative, right? How are you going to, so you're in this place, you're in this transition, right? How am I going to show up here? Who am I at this phase? And what am I going to choose and opt to be, right? And people really need assistance with this. And Dr. Gretal, I don't believe you when you said you hadn't done a lot of the research, because you used a key research term on this, and that is the buffering hypothesis, which is so true. Having that, the buffering hypothesis is really, it's not much of a hypothesis. I think they've proven it in so many different studies. But when we have that, that social support, not just from just anyone, but social support from people who are in your same situation, who are having to reinvent, it does wonders for you from a biochemical perspective, and also just from how much stress, how you're going to respond to that stress. Your stress appraisals begin to go down. And most importantly, it weakens the link between the stressful event, which is the job loss, employment loss, and adverse outcomes. That to me is the big important factor. So when I realized that, I was like, oh, wow. So this isn't just a nice to have. You'll do better when you have that social support system, and you also get better outcomes.
I love that, Jade. That just totally tickles me, because we've seen that on across the board, from not just this latest thing where everybody was terminated all at once, but because we're in a community of practice, we have been with each other for extended periods of time, so almost a decade in some instances. So it's an extremely well-established and trust-filled network. And if you take social network analysis and you recognize that each of us have served as critical nodes in the dissemination and support of change, and now we serve that for each other. So it's you're exactly right. Thank you for bringing that up. You're right on.
So I think that one of the important things then, if you've lost one community, how do you go about either reestablishing that network or finding a new community?
I would say The first thing is to figure out that it's a loss and get okay with it, because they tell us to compartmentalize, and like you're not supposed to care about these people that you spent I don't know how many hours of your life with, and that you look forward to seeing some of them and
Yeah.
know their kids. You're just supposed to pretend they never existed. So I think even having the acknowledgement of, no, these were people you worked with, and maybe, dare I say, maybe you loved a couple of them and cared very deeply about some of them, right? So letting the permission, I think, to even mourn some of that is radical.
No, I think that's an excellent point. I think we undervalue that these are, I mean, it might not be a physical death, but it is a soul death. And it is a loss when you've lost your job, because you not only lost your income, you've lost your community, your friends, who you had lunch with, who you socialized with outside of the office. I mean, I remember when I first started doing this, there was this one woman who said, she had worked there over almost 30 years. Wow. And all of a sudden, her friends and the people she socialized with, nobody wanted to have lunch with her anymore. Everybody was kind of, doing this, walking down the hallway. It was a blind eye. And she said that hurt more than the demoting. And then ultimately, I mean, she had enough years to retire. And they showed up one day and just gave her retirement papers in a shotgun envelope. She said the biggest hurt wasn't losing her job. It was losing her peers and her connection, and just feeling so betrayed by the people she thought were her friends. And then having to, leave the job and find a new life, and moved. And because I know sometimes job loss involves relocating as well. We've been surveying whistleblowers, and that was one of the things we saw a connection with as well, job loss, relocating. So we know people do that. I did that. But Tanya, you and I have had some connectivity here over the years. I think the experiences that you've had and what you're doing really kind of hit some of it home in terms of, this concrete, now what? I mean, there's a lot of grief and loss, but now what? How do we rebuild our lives, and how do we move forward?
I mean, it's hard. You have to find different outlets, different resources. And for whistleblowers in general, there's not a lot of them out there. I mean, it took me probably maybe over a year just to connect with you guys. And it happened through networking. And I felt like I was, a pariah. Sometimes I second guess, did I do the wrong thing? Should I have done things differently? But I should never have made it be felt like that. I did the right thing. I just needed somebody to have my back, or a group of people to have my back that had the same wavelengths as me, and the same thoughts and the same thought processes. We're not an abnormal community. We're actually a different type of community that go above and beyond, to protect their employees and in the general public in general.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it took a lot for me to continue persevering. There was a lot of times I wanted to give up, and I'm still going through the process, even though I work, with whistleblowers. I still have deficits and things that I still need to do as far as career-wise to get back on the path that I need to. But, going back to what I said, there was a loss of self-identity. I had to reinvent myself. Did I want to reinvent myself? I was scared to go back into the workforce. Do I want to open my own business? Which technically you can't when you have a whistleblowing case, because the whole point of it is to get your job back. So they put a restriction on you there too. So, especially all of us at the career levels we're at, it's very hard for us. Not saying that people lower down or any less affected, but it is a lot easier for some of them just to go out and get a different, job at a different place. But, being that, a lot of us have been executives at a higher level, we have to disclose that information when we're going on job interviews. You're being allowed to basically necessitate and control an entire company. So you can't start that wrong foot off by hiding something in secrecy, because then, it just looks like you had ill intentions to begin with. So the right thing to do is, I tell them what is at hand. And of course, the door shuts.
No, no, and and I know at one point after I first left the Pentagon, I just took any job. I took I did a consulting thing where I was basically somebody's admin. I learned that I'm terrible at admin, by the way. But you fake it till you make it. But I did that for a while, and I mean, I just tried other types of jobs. One, because I needed the money. I was at the time was trying to not lose my house, so I just did any kind of consulting. I did some speaking things. I worked temporarily at like an insurance company, just preparing document things. Like I just did anything. One, to keep me busy, one, to keep me employed as I thought about how I was going to reinvent what I was going to do next. And I know that, when I left the Defense Department and I left working on suicide prevention, I did it because I realized, they're never going to let me have a voice in this space, that, I could have the magic cure, and they were just going to hear anything I had to say as sour grapes, and it was going to be more gaslighting and more twisting. And so I started studying whistleblowers. And I was like, hey, this is my new community. Let me learn about it. And because I have a mental health background, and I figured there's got to be another way for me to use my skill set. So I think that's key here is, how do we think about some of the skills we do have, or learn about the ones we don't have, like admin and calendar organizing? How do we learn to maybe think outside our box? Jade, it looks like you were going to say something. Oh, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
I was just enamored with the chat because this was one of the questions. I'm not a whistleblower, but the question in the chat about, like, was it worth it? Getting asked that question, was it worth it? And I'd love to hear from Tanya. How do you get that question? And if so, how do you respond?
I've asked myself that millions of times. Well, I was at the bottom of the barrels, but after I came on with Whistleblowers, and I'm volunteering my time now and helping other people and their plights that I have had, it gives me a purpose. And maybe I needed to be brought all the way down to the bottom to reinvent myself to be this person to help these people. Maybe that's what I was meant to do. And a lot of the reinventing, I had to let go of a lot of old beliefs in my head, my pride, because it took me a lot in a man's world, because I was in transportation, to get to be an executive. So, right off the bat, when it's initiated, well, I'm not going to just go be a secretary somewhere. I'm not going to go work at a fast food place. I worked very hard to get to this place. But I had to let go of some of those things that I had instilled in my head, and some of those beliefs and feelings, to become a different person, to, do what I'm doing now and help other people.
I love what you said, Tanya, because I think part of that is a journey of sense making and how we interpret what happened to us. And surely there are elements of feeling that you were victimized, and yet we also know that a victim stance is not attractive. People aren't drawn to others that are in mourning. And I was just reading a book called Wintering, and I love the concept, the fact that there are times in our life in which we go through very dark periods, and how do we allow the grief and the disappointment and the how we make sense of that dark period? How do we allow ourselves to go through that, but also recognize that there's a seasonality to it, and that it's about emerging eventually and redefining and embracing our sense of worth, and that we are worthwhile. And so, because I have a Buddhist practice and because I meditate and I have a background in wellness and started with a counseling orientation, that's been really helpful in helping me go through this season, but also surrounding myself at this point with people that can help validate my skills and my capabilities, and then using my network to reach out and to, even if it's in volunteering, supporting efforts that will get me in front of people that could, where I could be of service. And ultimately, the benefit that I've had in the last decade is being able to select the projects that I want to be a part of wholeheartedly. If I'm going to write a grant, I'm not just writing a grant for you. I'm writing a grant because I believe in the outcomes that it's doing. And when you bring your whole value system to the work that you have, it makes it a lot easier to move forward and find joy in that space and connect with people that can support you in furthering your work. So I'm taking that same attitude with me now. And we'll see. Give me a year, and I'll come back and because it takes a while, I know.
So I see the chat's been very active as well. And usually when we get to about the halfway point of discussing amongst ourselves some of these topics and setting a tone for the rest of the roundtable, we usually open it up for questions so that we can start incorporating some other thoughts and ideas into what do we do post unemployment. So what I'd like people to think about maybe for the next few minutes is, so have you found another way, what did you call it, the plot twists? You should put that in the chat, by the way, so other people can see what it is. But what do we do now, and what creative things or outside the box kinds of things have people found that they're now doing, as opposed to what they were doing before? What does the reinventing our lives look like? Anybody want to jump in?
For me, it's really been about, where do I have the greatest joy? What do I love to do? And how can that be applied? Given we have no idea what type of shape the National Science Foundation will come out of this as, that may not be an avenue in the future, yet being able to articulate ideas and sell those ideas in a way that helps people envision a new reality for their corporation, for themselves, is part of it. But it may also end up in writing children's books. I don't know. It will be interesting to see exactly where this love of writing and will take me, as well as, again, capitalizing on the networks that I have and inviting conversations with people. Leading a community practice has been a really great opportunity to begin to explore sort of side interests that have emerged, whether it be hosting webinars like what you're doing here, or creating opportunity for virtual conversation that we get so siloed. It's interesting to bring all our practices together. I've loved hearing about Tanya and Jade, particularly the gaslighting is so interesting, because I haven't seen a lot of work on that. And it's like, okay, who do we need to get that in front of to help people navigate in the complicated world?
So again, what's the pivot though? I mean, what do you find, like if you had, like you mentioned earlier, Gretal, that you also have an interest in yoga and meditation. Is that something you see as not just something that's just for you, but is that something that you feel like you could share, or, is that your pivot point? Is that having one skill, could that become another skill? Like, I remember talking to a nurse who also liked, I think it was photography. So she got out her camera equipment and started to do portraits. Or another lady, she was not the best painter, but she said, I can do animals really well. And she came up with this creative thing to draw people's pets. And for, I don't know, $250, she would do a sketch of your dog.
Funny. I know that related to that for me has always been a background interest in holistic health. And so that of which this workplace equity and diversity has really emerged from that place of fostering healthy organizations, healthy systems that embrace and bring out the talents of all of our people in the system. Where that may change for me is moving into lifestyle coaching and lifestyle prescriptions. I've been engaged in certification processes for that. So it's tapping into this other interests where I have expertise and can bring evidence to bear, and the knowledge that I bring in that area to bear to support people in their journey. But who knows whether that ends up being where I end up going or not. But I loved your helping us to consider other things that bring us joy or orient us to help us move forward.
Yeah, and I just saw Wanda put animal care, that she did animal care. I know another lady who walks dogs, or helps people take care of their pets while they go to work. So and I think one of the other things that we've talked about in the past is that going back to work. Tanya, you said you sometimes people are looking to get their job back. Like, that's our immediate gut response is, I want my job back. But it's also a scary place to go.
Yeah.
If that's where the most of your gaslighting, mobbing, marginalizing, bullying, if that's where all that happened, that's a really scary place to go back to. So then what, Tanya?
I mean, absolutely. But it's not that I wanted to go back. The whole point of the whistleblower cases is that they are making you go back. And I was terrified. I'm like, are they going to give me an escort? Can I work remote? Like, I'm going right back into this toxic environment that, in my instance, it also included handguns and firearms to get me to put a hush order on me. So I was terrified. Well, I'm still terrified, because that's the whole point. I'm like, it's like making a woman go back to an abusive husband or something.
Yes.
So
Yes.
how are they making me go back there in order to prove that they did something wrong? I just don't get how the system was set up in that sense. I do think there should be some loopholes and exclusions, especially obviously when there's threats of bodily harm, which there are in a lot of cases of whistleblowers. And it's just, you feel like you did something wrong by reporting what you did. And I get it. Some of the cases aren't legit, and some of them, weren't followed through properly, but a lot of the cases are. And there's nobody out there to provide the support to the people to keep them going on the right path to do the right thing before they report the event, and even afterwards, that they're not alone. But afterwards, like, people, and I love Jackie's efforts, like, to help people find themselves, find out who they are, and focus on themselves to get themselves stronger, to continue the journey to see it to the end. And a lot of times in their plights, they're going to find out they're going to find a different joy in life and something else that they want to do. I've made the decision. I'm definitely not going back to that sector. I can take my skills elsewhere.
Good on you. I think that's a part of being healthy, right? Is validating for ourselves our experience and saying we don't have to do that. Nothing says we have to throw ourselves under the bus,
I mean, if they make me go back, obviously I'm going to have to. I just don't see with what the ramifications of what was done to me, how that would legally be possible for them to make me go back, but we'll see how it plays out. But that, again, I had that apprehension, and there's people that haven't had this life experiences that a lot of us have had, and it scares them. So they decide in turn to just, I'm going to close the case. I can't do this. I'm just going to go back to work, or I don't want this stigma. And then they close it out. And then that open violation is still out there, whatever that company or, whoever was doing what they were doing, because they were terrified. And they shouldn't feel scared to speak the truth. And overcome the fallacies that are out there versus speaking what actually is happening with tangible words.
Yeah. All right. So I do see Matthew has his hand raised. So if you want to.
Yeah. Hi, Jackie. How are you? Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah,
so what's
Tanya,
your pivot?
I'm an FBI whistleblower, so I'm in the same issue as you. I actually still, to this day, my issue is an ongoing investigation with the Department of Justice, where FBI agents are still following me to this day, stalking me. And I reported it to the Department of Justice and things like that. And my question to you is, if they do give me the opportunity, would you go back to the FBI, which, by the way, I report a criminal misconduct under the Biden administration for stalking and other. Jackie, I spoke to you about it online on LinkedIn before about what they had me do. I pretty much, my Fourth Amendment civil right was violated. Would you go back to an organization like that, or how would you handle something like that?
Well, I mean, so obviously, if you feel strongly that this is not the right fit for you, then don't go back. And now, of course, it's a different administration, a different time. I don't know how much that really truly matters right now, if that affects your, how you feel about it. But I think that a lot of times we hold on to the wanting to go back for so long that it's hard to see past that and to think that there's other things I could do with my life that doesn't involve going back into something like you were saying earlier. You don't want a person to go back into an abusive marital relationship. Why would you want them to go back into an abusive work relationship? So
the FBI came to my house. They followed me to work. I have pictures of them following.
Yeah, so why would you want to go back?
And then they'll drive off and stuff like that.
So why would you want to go back to work for them?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
But I mean, I think what the next best thing to do is to take inventory of yourself, your skills, what you want to do. Like I said, for a while, I didn't do much else but take on these, I don't want to say simple jobs because I didn't do them necessarily well. To any admin professional out there, thank you. But I tried other things, and I went and worked in other sectors, things I had never done before. And I found that it helped me shape, it expanded some of my skills. It shaped some of my thinking. It gave me pause and space to separate myself. I mean, most of my career has been with the military, mental health, suicide prevention. It gave me a chance to separate from that and then think about other things that I wanted to do or ways I could use my skill and sort of reinvent those skills. Whistleblowers of America was born in 2017.
Love it.
Because of that need. And I've done, I've written books now. I've gotten a doctorate that I never thought I would do. So lots of things have in the last, I can't believe it's 8 years now, that I never thought I would do. It wasn't the career path I thought I'd have. I thought I'd spend 20 years in the government and retire, pay off my house, which I lost. So lots of things changed, but it's what is that line? It's the valley of the shadow of death. You come out the other side, because when there's a shadow, there's also light, right? The shadow,
Right.
that you can't have a shadow without there being light cast from somewhere. So finding that light, I think, was important for me. And I've met some wonderful, wonderful people. A good number of them are on this call. I mean, I can't imagine my life without Paul Pearson at this point. Where would I be? So, and grateful for all the people who come to Whistleblowers of America and connect. Some of you drive me crazy, but for the most part, I've made what I think are going to be lifelong friends. And I appreciate everybody who helps us. I mean, Bali has helped us. Tanya has helped us. Gretal, you've been involved. Jade's going to be at our conference. Wanda has helped me with translating things for Whistleblowers. I forget who else is on the call. But whether we've met or not, I mean, this is our moral community. This is our new family. And I think that is super, super important. Bali, I was hoping you were going to come in.
Yeah, I think those are everything. Everyone has mentioned wonderful ideas. I just wanted to add that in cases where full recovery is not possible because of basically permanent damage to your health, your career, your finances, like late in life, which is pretty much what happened to me, another option is to use your story to help future whistleblowers. So what I did, or one of the things that I've done, is I have spoken to potential donors to the legal nonprofit that eventually helped me. And I recently helped them get a $500,000 grant just by telling my horror story because it's so awful. And then I'm also trying to work with other people to reform the so-called government investigations. And this is in air quotes, so that other people stuck using that, which is the free option, won't have the same the same terrible experience. And then what we can all do is, raise awareness of the gaslighting, kind of like the DARVO, deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender, because anybody could be on a jury, right? In a domestic violence case, in a whistleblower case, in a harassment case. That's the standard defense, right? So if everybody knows about that, it's going to lose its power, and so we're the ones that have had that used against us. So I think that's a really positive, that's a way to use a personal trauma to do something positive for other people, which I think is healing. So it's my 2 cents.
No, always valuable. And I think you've also bring up a good point, that and of course, that's one of the things I'm really interested in, is assessing people for disability when they can't go back to work, or they've been chronically unemployed and they've experienced lots of depression, PTSD, suicidal ideation, and they've really had a lot of life losses. They've lost a home, they're homeless, and they have been victimized in many ways. So I try to help them with their attorneys and work on their court cases with them. But I think that, and I think Wanda put it in the chat. The chat is moving fast, so thank you guys for chatting with each other. But I think Wanda mentioned earlier that volunteering was something that really helped her out. And, I know we get very focused on the need for compensation, but there's also a need for self-actualization. And I think that comes from, no matter what you do, finding your joy, finding your bliss is, I think, an important piece of this, because if you're not doing something you enjoy, the whistleblowing, I think, can take over, and you can get really stuck in that bad space and not feel like you can move forward. You lose that momentum.
Yeah.
So even if it's volunteering in an industry maybe you want to go into, like animal care, right? If you wanted to work in a veterinarian office or go back to school to become a veterinarian, anything like that, sometimes it means starting as a volunteer and just learning a new industry and building that skill set. And I know, gosh, there was a woman who volunteered at a church at like a youth pastor type program. And then eventually she got a job teaching in the school there. It just takes building those pieces and putting it back together. That becomes really important, I think. And, I know Tanya, you're doing this. Paul has done this. Self-employment. I think being an entrepreneur. I think Jade, you're entrepreneurial. What's that like? What does that take to build your own business?
Well, I haven't necessarily gotten that far yet. I'm trying to build up to that with consulting. Jade's obviously way further along than I am.
Well, Tanya, I actually did logistics for a very short period of time in college. And what a tough industry. I was in logistics brokering. What a tough industry. So my heart goes out to you. But I think that entrepreneurship for me, it's a roller coaster. It's like one day you're up here, you're like, yeah, I got so much going on. And then the valleys are very low. But I think that the autonomy is just something that can't be replaced. And I think that for whistleblowers, and from what I've been able to read about whistleblower trauma, because so much of my research was tied into the whistleblower trauma. There wasn't that much around gaslighting, but there was so much more around the impacts from whistleblowing. And I think that the courage to speak out when something's wrong, when something's unjust, that courage transformed into or channeled into being able to pick your own projects, being able to walk away when you need to, if something's unethical, is huge as far as taking your power back. So I think there's some direct links there that potentially, because again, I don't want to speak for anybody, but could be pretty healing.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Any comments from the audience?
I just want to say one more thing. As an outsider looking in, no one really wants to hire a whistleblower, but everybody wants to work for one. Think about that. I would work for someone who's, raised the alarm, had the ethics and the courage and the guts
Integrity.
to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. Bali?
Yeah, I think personally, I would love to work, with whistleblowers. I mean, I'm sort of getting close to retirement, but I think one thing that would be great is to have a whistleblower directory of all of our businesses and what we do, because we just intuitively trust each other. We know what good people we are. We know we're all doing the right thing. We know how ethical we are. And I would gladly recommend any of you, to any of my contacts that needed whatever services, you offer. I'm not really looking for new clients myself right now, but if you guys are, feel free to connect. I'm happy to, pass along the word of whatever you're doing, in your business.
No, Bali, you stole a little bit of my thunder there, because I just came back from Chicago, where I was at the Law and Society Association meeting, and of course met with some whistleblowers while I was out there. And we talked about the idea of a whistleblower chamber of commerce.
Wow.
Where we can, post jobs or post resumes, and people can help each other looking for skill sets. We've already created the associate membership for Whistleblowers of America. It's on our website. Paul has his own IT company, which I see he just put in running name is runs us in the background and makes all the magic happen, because as I mentioned, that would not be me. But our associate membership directory, we've started that, but I think specifically for people looking for work or looking to hire, I like this idea of a whistleblower chamber of commerce. And the gentleman I met with, I was hoping he would log in tonight, but the person I met with is kind of an expert in in building chambers. So I think, Paul, don't kill me, but that will probably be one of our next big projects, is building out where people can post maybe their resume, but their company or what they're doing and what kind of work they're looking for. And we could make that a searchable directory as well. And I have some experience with this with some of the veteran chambers that have been out there. So if you want to hire a veteran, we make it easy for veterans to connect with employers. I'd love to do the same thing for whistleblowers, because absolutely, this is who we should be hiring. This is who we should be wanting to work with, especially if they've been through and they've really done their work and they're ready for that post-traumatic growth and for something in their lives. So, Matthew, and then Benafa, I see you've posted some really interesting things in the chat too.
Yeah, I just want to say one last thing for everybody on here. If you guys are very depressed, let this sink into your head. According to the Department of Justice, this was one of the worst cases that they ever came across with my case, with abuse. And I felt extremely depressed. I felt overwhelmed. And my case is going on for 3 years now. I was an employee with the FBI for 1 year and 11 months. How they stalked my father, myself, and other family members who were politicians who did nothing wrong. And my cousin's still an FBI agent in the bureau. He couldn't believe it. And for DOJ to say this is one of the worst cases they ever came across, let that sink in, that I'm still here today.
No, and we're grateful that you are still here today, and that you've spent this time with us and joined us. And I really do hope that some of the folks that have joined us tonight for the first time will keep coming back, and that we'll find ways to continue connecting. Our next roundtable is in June, and I never remember what I'm supposed to say is the next time we'll see each other. Although I think I'm in London at the end of June for my graduation.
Yay.
Yay.
That's
So
awesome.
we'll be definitely sending out information. It may not be the same week. We may have to go a little bit early, but we'll get all that together and sent out to everybody. In the meantime, it was great seeing all of you. Look for our website. We have a newsletter that will be coming out, and please do stay in touch and keep connecting with each other. Thank you.